Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with number 137 in the series Viewers Games. If you would like your game to be analyzed on the Chess to Impress YouTube channel, you can send me the game by email to classroomchess64@gmail.com. It is the turn of Ruwan. R-E-W-A-N. Ruwan gave me very extensive instructions on how to pronounce his first name. Ruwan, I hope I'm doing a good job. He writes, "Hello Rick, I'm Ruwan. I just want to say that your videos are amazing and extremely helpful. This game has lots of tactical moments in it and a minor piece endgame in which black was in my camp. So there are a fair amount of positions to look at. But the special thing about it is that it contains 3 consecutive blunders by both sides. That's surely something to look at. All in all, it was a long battle," says Ruwan. Well, let's have a look at that game. It was played in the Chess Lovers Knockout Tournament on chess.com. It started on the 12th of April 2020. It was a correspondence game. 1 move per day was the time control. Ruwan was white. He had a rating of 1176 and his opponent was Aka Kark with a rating of 1147. So comparable strength. Ruwan opened with the knight. E6, D4, D5. Let's put the opening moves on the board. The bishops got developed. Knight C3 and now black plays again with that bishop that just went to D6. He plays it now to B4, not adhering to the rule of thumb to not play with the same piece in the opening twice. Bishop D2 unpinning the knight. Knight F6. The bishop got kicked and took on c3. Bishop takes to keep his pawn structure intact. It gives white the bishop pair, but in a closed position like this is not of any significance yet. Knight got developed. B4 and both players castled. B5, the pawn structure is completely symmetrical and both players have a piece sitting in front of their backward c-pawns. Rook c1 was played by Ruwan, a somewhat odd move. It's very unlikely that white will be able to play c2, c4 anytime soon because that square is firmly in black's hands. g6, bishop back to d2 and queen d6. Ruwan now also plays up the g-pawn and here the first mistake of the game, a5 played by black, and that will cost black a pawn if white reacts well. Alternatives given by the engine are knight e4 instead of a5 or bishop b7 completing development. But a5 was played and now Ruwan can win a pawn. He took on b5 and black thought he could win the pawn back on b4, but now white can take on c6. It was not played by Ruwan, but this is a move that wins white a pawn. You have to recapture and then bishop takes b4, regaining that pawn. And white has an extra pawn. And also this rook on c1 is now a better piece, as white can now play for the c4 push to solve this backward pawn. But after a takes b4, Ruwan did not play the intermediate move, bishop takes c6. He took on b4 straight away, which meant knight takes b4 is possible, bishop takes and queen takes, and the number of pawns is still equal. The bishop is hanging, so bishop d3 to safety, and bishop d7 finishing development and connecting the rooks. The position is about equal. Ruwan played c4 as planned, bishop a4 hitting the queen, queen went to d2 and the queens were swapped, and rook f2 b8. The game is still in the balance. Ruwan pushes the c-pawn further, c5. Rook b2 infiltrating in white's camp, hitting the knight, knight went to f3, and c6. And that is an instructive moment. There was no need for this pawn push. This pawn can now become a target on c6. Easier than if it was on c7. Black could have waited with this move. You have to be very careful with pawn moves as pawns don't move backwards. You cannot play the pawn back to c7 if you find out later that you're not happy with it on c6. The pawn on c6 is an easier target for white, for example with moves like knight e5, than if it was on c7. Ruwan opposes on the b-file, rook a b8, and a pair of rooks get swapped. Here knight e5 is a good move, putting the finger on the sore spot on c6. It means the bishop cannot really leave that pawn. But rook b1 was played by Ruwan. He does not like black owning the b-file. The rook gets swapped and we are in this minor piece endgame that Ruwan talked about in his introduction. Bishop d1 on move 26, knight e5, and the bishop has to hurry back to a4. It's clear that c6 is a weakness, and I'm sure black would love to play his pawn back to c7 now. But that's against the rules of the game. Ruwan wants to activate the king in the endgame. Correct play. Knight e4, king e1, knight c3 hitting the bishop. Bishop went to d3. And here king f8 seems a logical move, as it's clear that the king will be needed on the queen side. But black played king g7. Ruwan continues the activation of the king. Knight e4 check. And here is an important moment. White can really get a large advantage by taking that knight off the board. D takes e4 and king c3. This is actually a winning advantage for white. The knight is much stronger than the bishop, and also white's king is more active than its counterpart. So in this position, bishop takes e4 is the right move. Black is attacking the f2 pawn, and if you don't take, that knight takes f2 is a threat, so Ruwan went back to e2. A missed chance. Bishop b5 was played by black. And that's not a good move, and now Ruwan does react correctly. He does take on b5, c takes b5, and this gives white a far advanced passed pawn that can become very dangerous. And black's b pawn is on its own without much help from black's pieces. It's in danger of being picked off the board. So swapping the bishops has been a good deal for white, for Ruwan. He played c6, immediately start pushing that passed pawn. It's only 2 squares away from promotion. Knight d6, king d2, king f8, king c3, activating the king. Black also has to hurry with his king to the queen side. King b4, and here king d8 is a good move. King c5 and king c7. White is better, but black is still standing. But after king b4, black played f6 instead. And now knight d7 is a very good move, as king d8 is now not possible, as then the pawn on f6 would be hanging, and that gives white a chance to get his king to c5. So knight d7 is a good move, but in this position, Ruwan played the knight back to d3. King d8, king c5 and king c7. As said, black is still standing even though white has the better position, a lot more room to maneuver. And his pawn is stronger than black's passed pawn. And now we get these 3 consecutive blunders that Ruwan was talking about. Here f3 is a good move to deny the knight the e4 square. But knight b4 was played by Ruwan, not a good move, because now knight e4 check is possible. And quite strong. It was not played, but this is the way for black to hold this game. Let's look at a variation. If you take that pawn, then it's very important and very instructive to not take on f2, because then white wins. Let's look at a variation. Knight a6 check. The king has to go back. And king b6. You can try and keep winning pawns. A double attack, but then there is knight c5. Knight takes e3, knight takes e6, with the threat of knight f4 takes d5 if this knight plays, which then could give white 2 connected passed pawns. So the knight on e3 cannot really play it. It has to keep protecting the pawn on d5. So let's go back. We played knight e4 check, good move, king takes b5, and as said, don't take on f2. Much stronger is to play knight c3 check. Very instructive this. Pushing the white king away from white's prized possession, which is a c6 pawn. Then white will not be able to move his knight without losing that pawn. So let's look at a few moves. King a6, you have to move away from the c pawn and then knight d1. Now you can go pawn hunting, and if the white king returns to b5, then we will return our knight to c3 with a move repetition. Very interesting, these knight endgames are very complex. So let's go back to the game. Knight b4 was played, not a good move from Ruan, and knight e4 check will give black equality if he plays it properly. But here we have the first big blunder of the game. Instead of knight e4 check, black played h5. And now we see the point of knight b4, because white can now win the black knight. And if you want to put the video on pause, how does white win on the spot here? Then you can look for yourself. The winning move here is knight a6 check, pushing the king back, after which the knight on d6 will just be hanging. But Ruan didn't see it. He played f3 instead, one move too late. But white still is doing very well. Knight c4, and here e4 is the best move with a large advantage. Knight c4 is hitting the pawn on e3, but Ruan decides to protect the e3 pawn with the knight. Knight back to d6, knight b4, and now a g5 double question mark. Black should have tried knight c4, trying for a move repetition. But g5 is a big blunder in the same way as h5 was a blunder before, because we have the same positioning of the pieces on the queen side, and now Ruan does see it. Knight a6 check wins the knight and wins the game. Let's show you the remaining moves. King d8, and there goes that knight off the board, and now it's very simple. g4, f4, king c8, c7 and e5. And instead of picking off all black's pawns, Ruan finds a very elegant way to finish the game. With a checkmate combination, let's admire the knight jumps. First he plays king c6. Now you should note that the king is still mated, it does not have any moves. So all you need to do is give check to the king and then it will be checkmate. And there is no danger of a real stalemate because black has enough pawns to make moves with. And black pushes the b pawn instead of taking it off the board. Ruan goes for this nice checkmate. There goes the knight. b3, knight d7, b2, and a very nice last move. Last knight jump, knight b6 is checkmate, and Ruan had won this game. Well played, Ruan, for a player of your rating of 1176. This was a very good game. I think the game was very instructive and very entertaining, and I want to thank you for sending it in. Well played, Ruan. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like this video, then it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.